2021, and Matt, I might be a little bit biased here in terms of our preparation this week, but I feel like it's got the ability to maybe be the best show yet. I know our state of the game shows that we've been highlighting and advertising have been some that the fans are really eager for. We've done a little baseball, plan on doing basketball down the road. This week is our state of the game football. And I guess I want to start with some general comments. Again, thank you everyone that's out there listening. Podcast apps, you can get us on the iHeart, iTunes, all the way across the board. YouTube, SVC Sports Zone. Shayne, again, I just want to dive right into this because I just think we have so much good info tonight. And Matt, I guess the introduction comment for me, when I think of football, I think as probably the top dog in terms of popularity. It's kind of the one that seems to drive the financial bus. It seems to be the one that community-wise, maybe it's an event, maybe it's a social event, maybe it is the sport itself for some people, but I think it's that fall is first. I think it's once per week. I think it's convenient. I think it's family, come out on a Friday night, go to the game type of thing. So I guess those are some of the things up front. First, just let me get your comment just on football in general here to start, and why you think this is such an exciting show when we do these state of the games.
Yeah, I think we've been looking forward to doing this show for a while. I mean, let's face it. I think we all understand that football tends to be, the most popular sport for some of the reasons you just said. It's a sport that, like you said, you sort of look forward to all summer, which is the off season, right? For high school in general, you're looking forward to fall rolling around. You're looking forward to the nice weather of an evening and getting out and under the lights. And it's that once a week event. It's that community, right? It's the band. It's just the whole kind of pageantry of it. And I think that it's like that at all levels, college, pro. But I think it's too a sport that's intriguing to talk about because as popular as it is, and we're going to dive into some of this tonight, there are some issues with it. There are some things that have come into question in recent history, and so it's going to be interesting looking at both sides of it for sure.
Matt, when we do these games with baseball, basketball, I feel like we're more than qualified to lead the discussion on our own, and then we get out and talk to our colleagues and so forth. With it being football, you and I have spent a ton of time learning the game of football. We can analyze it. We're even getting better at the X's and O's. I know just as a coach myself, I lean on coaches to talk to them. I pick their brain. But in fairness, one of the things we need to do that's very unique to expanding the zone, I think, in terms of generating our football discussion and making sure that our feedback is accurate and making sure that the topics that we are choosing are the correct ones. What better way than to reach out and try to get some football coaches involved? I know we've emailed and we've called and we've talked to, between the two of us, probably double-digit coaches. But we have quite a treat for our listeners this week. Tell them a little bit about how we've went out and really, quite frankly, gotten one of Ohio's best.
Yeah, Shayne, this is the first time in I guess 21 episodes now or whatever that we're at that we're going to have a guest on here. So we're excited about that. Like you said, we'd reached out to some coaches and they were kind enough to get back. But one particular coach agreed to come on with us tonight. We're excited about him, a guy by the name of Shawn Buescher from West Jefferson High School. A lot of people in our area may remember him from being an athlete in this local area growing up. Since then has went on up there to West Jeff, and I think since 2002 has been there and has just built a powerhouse program up there, really at the, I believe, D6 level. And, they're just a perennial playoff team, a team that has went deep into the playoffs several times. And in fact, if people want to read his bio, we're going to put that in the description of our YouTube when we release the show and all that. But if you want to make it real simple, he's an absolute lead pipe Hall of Fame football coach. When it's all said and done at the high school level, there's no question about it. He's that good. And, he really interesting views on things you're going to see throughout the show tonight. We're going to play several clips of the interview as he just discusses a lot of the same things we're going to discuss tonight and really answer some of the questions for us and gives us, an expert opinion. Like you said, Shayne, you and I have a unique look at it because we're not football coaches and we're kind of fans, but yet we're in the coaching ranks to where we sort of see some, as an athletic director, I see some of the inner workings of it. You've seen some as well, but really, we wanted an expert opinion too, somebody who has had the success over the course of 2 decades like Coach Buescher has. And so it's going to be a lot of fun just hearing from him tonight.
I feel like we always should start in these state of the games with that general overview. I touched on some of these things there in the opening, Matt, but when I talk about its consistency, I think that has a lot to do with what makes football so good. It kind of leaves you wanting just a little bit more, And so if I start in a general overview, I guess I talk about how we're first day back to school today. Okay. So the kids come and, we paint the poles. The seniors get to paint the poles on the sidewalk and everything's nice and neat and it's black and gold and it's Bearcats here, Bearcats there. And there's a real good morale. There's something about the fall season that is new, right? It's a start over. Everybody is kind of fresh. And so you get to those Friday nights and it's exciting community thing. And I feel like, there's not really cuts. There's not really roster limits, right? It's kind of room for everybody. You're on the varsity football team. You wear your jersey to school. You stand there. And as you go into the higher levels, maybe it's a gambling thing. Maybe it's a fantasy football thing. Maybe it's whatever it may be. I think there's a lot of unique things that make it once a week. And there's a lot of things that draw people to the game. And I think you hear so many coaches talk about numbers. Don't you feel like it's the schools that are able to take advantage of some of those things? And obviously having success helps, but that's kind of, in terms of the state of the game, it starts with me with a general overview and kind of the participation of the sport, maybe taking a little bit of a hit and as a result, changing some things up and maybe starting to rebound from that. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think it's unique to every situation. I think we're going to hear, like I said, from Coach Buescher tonight, and he talks a little bit about in one of the clips that we'll play. He talks a little bit about, the fact that football is unique from that once a week type of event almost. It's like where for basketball and volleyball and baseball, you have games, and it's almost like football. You have the event, the Friday night, because it's once a week. And I think, he talks about that a little bit in one of the clips we'll play. He talks a little bit about, you just mentioned how everybody can be involved. It's you don't have to make cuts. You have the unlimited roster spots. He's at a D6 school and has, are you ready for this, Shayne? 80 guys on his roster. That is nuts. Think about that for a minute. 80 guys. I'd like to know how many schools at the D3 level have 80 guys. I don't know very many. And you just talked about participation. And in some areas it's hurting. But I think you'll see when you listen to Coach Buescher tonight, how they treat their kids, how they run their program. It goes to show you numbers don't have to be in trouble. If you do it the right way, there's numbers out there a little bit, but
it wasn't just a big class, Matt. It was like 41 upperclassmen, 39 under, and then he got like another 40 in the middle school.
I think he said, no, he does. He talks about that, how they had 41 juniors and seniors, which a lot of teams don't have 41 guys, and especially at the D6 level.
Right.
And like you said, 40 middle schoolers. You're talking 100 kids, 7 through 12 in the program. It's just crazy. So it goes to show you that even a sport that has had its issues with participation due to some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, like safety and problems like that, if it's done the right way, there's still room to be very, very, very successful and have high participation numbers. But you mentioned some of the things at the higher levels, not so much the high school, but like the fantasy football, right? The gambling, the things that what happens, I think, is what it does, what professional football has done, especially has attracted the average fan who maybe doesn't even root for one team, maybe could care less who wins and loses, but will get together with their buddies and play some fantasy football, right?
Sure.
We'll get out, we'll get on DraftKings and put a team out there that day so they have something to do and sit around and watch the Red Zone channel or whatever. They might not even watch a game. They may just watch, parts of games. But I think the NFL has done a good job with that part of their product. I think college football, it's that Saturday afternoon event, right? It's that tailgating. It's having 20 people over to your house and grill out and watch Ohio State, except for this year. But when that's not going to happen. But you know what I mean? It's that it really is centered around. Let's face it. Anything in life that you don't get a lot of, if you just get a little taste of it, you want more, right? And football almost gives us that. Whereas, 82 NBA games, 162 on most years baseball games. It's that every game counts. It's the once a week type deal. I think that's always been intriguing about football. It's always left people wanting more.
I don't think there's any question. I think the consistency of schedule, it's pretty basic on when it is, right? It's Friday night.
Right.
The most confusion here in the last couple of years is it 7 or 7:30. I mean, that's about as much as it is. I mean, anymore, and I think there's a lot other sports can learn from what's made football so valuable in the eyes of people in terms of, the confusion of, are we playing JV girls basketball? Are we not? What time's it starting? How many quarters? And then, in boys basketball, there's no freshman game. Okay, we starting at 5, we starting at 6, hey, what nights do they play this week? I mean, you don't ask those questions in football. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where you understand, hey, for 10 straight Friday nights, we're going to pick out the home games, maybe even some road games or whatever, and that's what we're going to do. I guess what I would say in this general start here is football needs to be aware of this and be real careful, because what we all start to do, Matt, you said leave us craving for more. I think we all do sometimes in leadership is we get a little greedy, and you'll see it with the NFL. They'll start to sneak in a Thursday night game, and guess what? The ratings are, not quite as much. Think about what we do in fantasy football. It's a little confusing, right? We got to get that in by Thursday night. So I would just caution people sometimes to pick out, when you have something this good, pick out what it is that's really good and be careful not to overdo it. But then I think football's done a really good job of kind of looking in the mirror when these complaints came out, or I don't know if complaints are the right words, concerns had started to come out, the public opinion, parents, obviously some long-term studies started to take place, and we're learning from those now. So do you see both sides of this in terms of our general overview here to start on how we have to be aware of both?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically, sort of to summarize this introduction, I guess, is that I don't think either one of us disagree that football, the popularity is still there for sure. I mean, football is highly popular. I mean, like I said, I think it's hard to argue that in a lot of ways it's not the most popular thing going. But you lead into the next topic a little bit, which are, when we're talking state of the game, right? We have to look at both sides of it, the concerns. And I think you mentioned, or alluded to at least, the safety concerns. That's one of the things where, the perspective a little bit in society has changed, where all of a sudden we're starting to learn more about some long-term effects. We're starting to learn, about some of these injuries and things like that nature. And I found it interesting. In fact, Shayne, I think we'll go ahead here in a second, just play that first clip with Coach Buescher today, because in this clip, you're going to see, I had led in with the question of, okay, look, football's come under attack a little bit, in recent years, really. And I just asked Coach Buescher sort of his response to football coming under attack and what needed to be done with the safety issues. You're going to hear him talk a little bit about that. You're going to hear him get into a couple other topics about how they handle things in their program. And it's a really interesting clip. So I'm just going to go ahead and play it.
Yeah, I do feel like, the state of football was under attack by society. And to an extent, Matt, I feel like justifiably so. We had to make some changes in our game to make it safer. I think some coaches were already doing that. Some were not. I think a lot of the changes regarding practice restrictions in terms of the limited amount of contact, you can no longer blindside block, for example. At the high school level, you really can't cut downfield. I think a lot of those things added safety to the game. Those are much needed. I mean, some of us, I think we're already doing those things. I know here at West Jefferson, we never hit after the first day of full padded contact. We would only hit if there's an inter-squad scrimmage or if we're participating against another school. So, Monday through Thursday, we never put full pads on here at West Jefferson. We only wear shorter pads and shorts. We never tackle to the ground. We're doing everything we can to minimize the amount of contact that our kids have. And I think those changes were good. And football is a popular sport. In a lot of high school communities and colleges, and it's kind of the event that takes place that week. And that's because, there's only one per week. I mean, when you get into the world of baseball, soccer, basketball, those types of things, and justifiably so, there's multiple contests throughout the course of the week. So football by nature is just a little bit different. So in order to make sure that we could do everything we could to keep the game alive and participation numbers up, and relieve the fear out of some parents, I think those changes that people made were justified and needed, to be quite frank.
It seemed like high school football or even middle school, whatever, they were sort of late to the party in terms of limiting contact in practice. You think about it, pros did it, college did it more. Do you think it was like that, like public pressure in little small towns, like we should be toughening these boys up and hitting? Do you think it was lack of OHSA, stepping in and saying we're going to make concrete rules, or National Federation make concrete rules? Like, why do you think? Maybe you don't even agree with me, but it seemed like high school was last to get that.
Well, I think they were. I mean, I think your youth still, to some degree, depending on who's down there, might still not even be joining that party. Right now, here at West Jefferson, we're blessed. Our former defense coordinator is in charge of our youth football program, so they adhere to the same standards that high school athletic associations do, and they follow in with our program. So we limit contact down there as well when they practice a couple of days a week. When they practice for a certain length of time, one day is full padded down there, the other day is not. So we're doing those things here. So why was everyone late to the party? I just think it was an old school way of thinking. Man, I think we all fall into that trap a little bit. Well, I was coached this way when I played, and that doesn't mean it's right. That just means the way it was done then, for the lack of knowledge that everyone had. So I think some people, change. It can be fearful. People are scared of change, right? And it pushes you outside your comfort zone. A lot of people don't like to be uncomfortable, and so. Something we tell our kids all the time, you better get comfortable being uncomfortable in our program. And as adults, I don't think we like that, right? We're okay with just being average at things because, really, for the most part, you can be somewhat successful in society and just be average.
Right.
And so I think as a society, we've grown to accept average. So I think people are like, well, this is the way it's always been done. So this is the way it should be done. And there's no way you can be successful by doing it this way. Well, in the end, I would argue by going to less contact. We have 80 kids out 9 through 12. We're Division VI school. So, we don't let our older kids beat on young kids here. We treat our kids with respect. We divide our kids up into A and B practices where freshmen and sophomores are always competing against same age kids, and juniors and seniors are competing against same age kids. And I think the main reason why we have so many kids out in our program, I mean, we have 40 middle school kids out in 2 grades, is we treat our kids with respect. We give them ownership in our program. We make them feel like they're valued and their opinions matter. And I think all that together, all the way down to how we handle our biddy program here, if you will, second, third, fourth on up, is why that football here from a participation number standpoint is still at an all-time high.
Those are crazy numbers, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know. I tell you what, Matt, we have, I think we got 41 upperclassmen, junior and seniors, I think.
That is crazy, man.
We're about balanced in terms of our numbers. So I guess the reason I point that out is I don't think our numbers are going away, right? I mean, we have about 40 juniors and seniors, about 40 freshmen and sophomores. We have about 20 in each grade at the 7th and 8th grade level. Matt, we're blessed here. I think we're blessed athletically across the board. I think our wrestling coach, our basketball coach, our baseball coach are great men. Our girls sports have great coaches and they're successful. It's not utopia here. Don't get me wrong. We got our problems. Everybody does, right? But I think we've got great people. I think we've got great leadership here, administratively. I really do. And we're all pulling the rope in the same direction. And we all attack problems. We have problems, but we deal with them and we move on and we try to do it in a positive manner. And I think that kind of resonates through our school.
Well, that's some really good stuff. I tell you, Matt, just a dynamic leader. Just really enjoy listening to Coach. And there's two things that jump right out at me. Number one is the ability as a leader to look in the mirror, to be a self-evaluator. Even though it's an evaluation of the game, you can tell as a leader there's a willingness there to, I think the quote was, it was kind of fair. Some of the concerns were fair. And not only, think about this, not only does he look in the mirror and have a willingness to evaluate, okay, what are the problems? They're legit. How can we fix it? This guy takes it to the extreme where he starts to take what kind of is a negative and turn it into a direct positive for his program in terms of the way he's going to change the way he starts to do things. Don't you think in terms of leadership that there's a lot of times people get really bitter and think, well, what do you mean criticize this? This is crazy. We've done it this way for 25, 30 years or whatever. And people get a little stubborn. And as a result, you don't get anything accomplished and you continue to go down a negative pathway. Obviously, he took the different direction there and really, in my opinion, kind of turned it into a great positive.
Well, he really did, and I think that he even mentioned what you're just talking about, right? He mentioned the stubbornness, a little bit of how it's kind of an old school view, and this is the way we've always done it. And we've talked a lot on this show before, Shayne, about how if your only response to something is, well, that's just the way we've always done it, you may want to reevaluate. There should be a better reason than that, right? That's not good enough. Just to say, well, that's the way we've always done it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that he took a unique approach and an approach that, look what it's done. I mean, one, it's obviously improved the health of his team. It's improved the numbers, like we talked about, which were just ridiculously off the chart. Yes. Because again, if you're out there, if kids know that you have their safety in mind, you're not killing them every day, then more kids are going to play. Because I guarantee you, a lot of freshman classes are small. I mean, there's a reason why, you'll have 25 eighth graders and all of a sudden you have 10 freshmen. They're scared to play is part of it. And I think that, in a program where you're not hitting every single day, you're going to increase your numbers that way. And I can guarantee you this, for people out there that think, well, that's a soft approach. Okay. One, the numbers don't lie. Look at their success. But I would tell you this, knowing what I do know about Coach Buescher, if you rolled into one of his practices, they may not be hitting, but I guarantee you they're working. I'm
guessing they're getting after it a little bit.
Yeah, they're not just sitting around, playing catch. I mean, they're working. So it's not I don't think it's a soft approach at all. I think it's a smart approach. Here's, and I mentioned this to him when I said, high school was sort of last to the party. I mean, it's always sort of been a running joke, and it's not funny really, but it's always just been this conversational piece that I've had with some of my friends to say, you do realize that there's probably peewee football teams out there that hit more than the New England Patriots in their practices. Think about that for a minute. I mean, there probably is. I guarantee you there are junior high teams that hit more than Ohio State hits at practice. I mean, it's backwards. But what happened is these professional and college teams, they started to see the danger in it. They started to see the usefulness of backing off. And then, give credit to their organizations too, which put some rules in place. We all know the NCAA does a whole lot of stuff that leaves you scratching your head, right? But they also, in this case, I think, put some rules in place to limit some of that at the college level. And I got to be honest with you, I would have liked to have seen the National Federation of High School and the OHSAA do a little bit more because for every Coach Buescher out there that's smart enough to realize, I shouldn't be out there hitting for, an hour every day. There's some coaches out there that do. I hate to tell you. All right. And because of that, I think the OHSAA needs to take a firmer hand in this and say, wait a minute, because we have some people that can't make a good decision, we're going to have to make it for you. And here are some rules in place to sort of prevent some of that.
You mentioned the point I wanted to really emphasize here and get a little further discussion going on the incoming freshmen. I know in a sport like baseball, it's just intimidating sometimes, Matt, in Ohio's weather. If we start inside, I've got to be careful in terms of some of my crossfire throwing and some of the different things because it's intimidating sometimes. You get that 18-year-old from, 50, 60, 70 feet away in certain drills, and they throw it. The freshman goes home scared to death, doesn't want to come back. I can only imagine in football how much that happens, right? It's a
Right.
situation. It's an intimidating thing. It's the weight room. It's the way they're treated. It matters. Like it or not, it matters. And I see way too many schools that will just whoop people in junior high. You'll see them win 7th and 8th grade championship after championship after championship, and then 2 years later you'll pick up their roster. When I'm typing them in here on SVC Sports Zone, or I'm seeing an area roster even outside of our league, and I'll be like, yeah, that's that group that was really good 2 years ago, and you'll look down, there's like 7 sophomores. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you start to ask yourself, well, what's happened? What's the disconnect there? And I think there has to be some sort of connection of how, because think about it, it's not like in the girls' sport. The girls' sport, so many of these young ladies are developing earlier, and they're ready to go. Their freshman year, you roll them out, they're ready. The freshman student athlete is probably more of that. Get you a little spurt around 7th, 8th, 9th grade. You'll probably get that second one, sophomore if you're lucky, probably more junior year. So there's a disconnect there in terms of what a freshman and a junior or senior looks like in the weight room or in a tackling drill or some different things. So don't you think that's just a crazy overlooked thing by way too many football coaches that has a lot to do with the numbers declining at a lot of these schools, particularly the smaller schools?
I don't think there's any question, and I think you heard Coach Buescher in that clip right there talk a little bit about how they try to treat their players, right, and how they really value their guys, and they want to make sure their guys understand they value them, and they can take ownership in the program.
Right.
That doesn't start. I mean, here's the thing about that, and we're going to play a clip here in just a second, Shayne. Maybe we'll just sort of lead into this where he talks about youth football, because I think you could even take this further back.
Oh yeah, it comes down the line, yeah.
I think it starts even before that of doing things the right way at a younger age, which sort of sets that tone a little bit as they're coming up through. Because if you're not careful, when a kid stops playing, whatever sport it is, like you said, there's a disconnect, and you have to ask yourself what causes that disconnect. Right now, in the example you just gave, okay, maybe that disconnect came between the 8th and 9th grade, but I would argue that sometimes that disconnect comes even sooner. And even though that maybe a kid goes ahead and plays 7th and 8th grade football, he's on the verge of sort of giving it up because either, man, it's just not fun anymore. I've lost the love for it. And I think in this clip we're getting ready to play, Coach Buescher talks a little bit about, how it's not just the injury part of it. We talk a little bit about flag football versus tackle football, right? That's always been a debate. But it's also the way the coaches sort of handle things in terms of practice and their approach to kids that maybe either cause kids to love the game more or cause them to start to not like it. And that disconnect then starts at a really young age. So I tell you what, I'll go ahead, Shayne, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and throw this clip on there, and then we'll come out of it and talk about it.
Sure.
Yeah, this might be an unpopular opinion among football coaches and maybe some in society, but I don't necessarily feel like you have to participate in tackle football on the youth level to have a successful high school career, if you will. A lot of our kids here do participate in tackle football in the youth, but I don't think it's a necessary means. You can come out in 7th grade and have a successful career. Heck, you can come out in high school and have a successful career. I would argue that flag at the younger levels might teach you even better tackling techniques, because you've got to, break down in space in order to grab the flag. You got to get in a proper hit position because if you lunge, you're going to miss the flag, right? You might be able to lunge and get lucky and make a tackle, right? So it actually gets you in a good hit position with your head up and all the safety things that we preach about tackling. Now, in saying that, my 2 kids coming up through did play tackle. They wanted to. And they were blessed to be around men that did it the right way. So if tackling is being handled the right way at the youth level, it can be productive and your kids will not be in harm's way. But unfortunately, I do believe from what my experience and seeing some things, there very well could be some youth coaches that aren't doing the right way. So there's 2 things that are going to happen there. Then one is your kid could get injured. At the younger level, it's a little bit more unlikely because they're not extremely physical, but it could happen. And 2, is they could take the love out of the game for those kids if they don't handle it right. If that's all they do is hit and scream and yell at them, then, football's tough and it's hot. You got pads on, you're hitting. There's a little bit of intimidation anyway if you're an undersized kid, and if all you got is some grown man screaming at you, you got to be tougher, and that's the only way you can play this game. Well, that's not necessarily true. We find roles for kids, our tough kids, we find roles for. Kids that aren't so tough, guess what? We find roles for them too. Like, you need some dudes out there that might catch the football that might not be the toughest dudes in the world, right? We find places for kids, and they're valued, and we don't try to make them something they're not. Like, if we got a kid right now at wide receiver, which we have one, he's not the most physical kid. Guess what? He doesn't play much defense for us. Matter of fact, he doesn't play defense at all, but the dude can catch.
Yeah.
And run routes. So, we get him involved, right? And we valued him. So if we would bring him in our program and did nothing but belittle him and say, you're not tough, well, there's different types of toughness,
Right.
And so we value those kids. So I think to get your younger levels coaches to understand that, that would only help your program moving forward. I talk to our guys about this, Matt, our coaches, if you will, all the way down to Biddy. If you're 0-8, 0-10 or whatever, every one of your kids come back out the next year, you were successful. But if you were 8-0 and you lose half of those kids, you were a failure as a coach. Our whole goal is to create an experience where they keep coming back out the next year. And one, that'll help us with on-field success, Matt. But I don't think this is, one thing that drives me crazy, Matt, is, you hear some people like, football, is a great teacher of life. Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Matt, I disagree with that. I don't think there's any sport that's a teacher of life. I think coaches are teachers of life.
Yeah.
If you're playing a sport, basketball, football, baseball, but you have a guy that doesn't teach young men how to do it the right way on and off the field, that sport itself's not going to teach those guys those character traits. Coaches do. And so I want to keep kids involved in our program here because I believe that I would hope our parents would think this, that we do value the student athlete as a whole. We talk more about how to be a good person and how to be a good student far before we talk about how to be a good football player. And so keeping kids involved in our program, I would like to think that people in our community think can only help our community be better because of what we value in our program.
You hear people say, coach them like they're your own kids, but you said.
Yeah, I do. I stressed our coaches, you better coach those kids like their parents are standing right beside them.
That's incredibly said. I mean,
and that's how we want to make sure that we're handling situations. We don't want to be little kids. We want to make sure that, and I'm not saying that it's not, we hold kids accountable, and I'm not saying we're never intense. We have very pointed conversations in our program, and our goal every day is to make kids fail. And I think some people are like, when I say that, they look at me like I'm crazy. Well, the only way you're going to grow is by having failure in your life. If you're just sitting around being comfortable every day, you did not push yourself outside your comfort zone, you're not going to get any better. So we constantly trying to stretch our kids, mentally and physically and emotionally, but we're always going to make sure that we treat them with the respect they deserve. And if you're not willing to have a conversation with a kid in a certain way without their parents standing there, then, really in essence, you shouldn't be having it with them anyway. And, I was, probably, no doubt, as a younger coach, I probably felt on that numerous times, right? But I'm very conscious of that now, of how we want to make sure we're treating our student athletes. But like I said, just to reinforce, that doesn't mean we don't get after it, because we do. Right. And you have to. But there's certain ways you can do it and do it the right way.
Oh, yeah. I've got a lot of players that come in from 17 years ago come in and say, you've gotten soft, man.
I get pulled that all the time too, man. That's funny. That's funny.
I'd like to think I just do it a little better now, but yeah.
And I'm with you. It's funny. Our staff has got a lot of ex-players, and they make fun of me all the time, saying I'm soft now. And one, I think that their stories of how tough I was on them is probably exaggerated. And two, to your point, is I think I would like to think I just do it better now. I'm more mature. I got a better understanding. I'm a little bit more self-aware of and maybe I'm a little bit more comfortable in terms of just truly doing it the way that I think it should be done instead of the way that maybe it was done to me.
Matt, in that clip, it's hard not to come right out of it thinking flag versus tackle, right? I mean, that's really what the kind of the elephant in the room is. Everyone has trouble, they'll talk youth sports, and we did an entire show on youth sports. But when we're talking football, I think the foundation of the youth sport has to first be having an opinion on Is it flag? Is it tackle? What's interesting with what Coach is saying there is one of the people I really enjoyed reading, Todd Whitaker, was a leadership author that I had read several years ago. And one of the big phrases that really stuck with me, it's people, not program. I think some people get so stuck up on it has to be flag or it has to be tackle. What I end up getting from Coach, and he's so dynamic as a leader, just listening to him almost makes you want to like fire up and hit somebody, right? Like it's
Right.
but it's one of those things. Don't you think that it's kind of like I almost feel like it's more of the people running it. It's more of the coaching. It's more of their delivery. It's how I treat people almost more than what it is I'm doing in terms of the program philosophy.
You know, Shayne, another thing, you know, just to prove your point of the it's people, not programs, is, and I think Coach talked about it there. I thought this comment was really powerful, and it was something I've never thought of before. He talks about, again, how you treat your players, and he tells his coaches, because we've all heard, and I even said this to him, we've all heard, you know, you want to coach like you're coaching your own kid, or treat people the same way you would treat your own kid. He takes it a step further. He says, coach that kid like his parents standing right next to him. I thought that was just really neat approach.
That's outstanding,
because,
right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're not hiding anything here. In full transparency, you know, I would say this to you whether your dad was standing right there next to you or not. And I think when you take that approach as a coach, you can really look yourself in the mirror and know in your heart that you're doing the right thing. Because let's face it, you wouldn't say something to a player in front of his parents that was out of line or off collar or you know, unnecessary. So don't do it, you know, without them. And I think what's impressive about what Coach Buescher just said is, when we teach our kids character, and we always talk to our guys about, you know, it's really the way you act when nobody's watching. You know, that's sort of your character. That's really who you are. And that's what he's talking about there, right? Is if as a coach, you treat kids the way you would treat them if their parents were watching practice, even though their parents aren't watching practice, that's that true character, the same thing you're instilling in kids. So really, it's a great example of, hey guys, we're towing the same lines we ask you to tow. We ask you to be a certain way, whether people are watching or not. And we're doing the same thing as coaches. So I just thought that was a really, you know, I don't know how much that has to do with the state of the game, but I just thought it was a powerful leadership moment that I didn't want to not talk about. Yeah, you just mentioned that it's people, not programs. I mean, I think he basically said that in this sense. You know, he said you can play flag, you can play tackle. They both work, and they're both safe if they are ran by the right people, right? The right coaches. He talked about how they're fortunate in their program to have people doing it the right way, and that how his own kids played tackle football, but he felt good about it because he knew the people coaching them were doing it the right way. And he also mentioned that the people coaching some of the other teams that he saw weren't necessarily doing it the right way. And it gets a little, but you know, the one thing he mentioned that I never thought about was, because we get so eaten up in football with the injury part of it, right? I think you know, I've got an 8-year-old that's going to play flag football, and you know, he wouldn't mind going and playing tackle and kind of, because, you know, kids that age, they like to roll around in the dirt. They like to wrestle around.
Right.
So
right.
I don't, but as parents, we think of it as, well, I don't think that's right for him physically yet to just go out and play tackle football. To be honest with you, I do worry about the injury part of that a little bit. But what I thought Coach Buescher said that was really interesting was, beyond the injury, a kid can lose his love of the game completely if you've got the wrong type of guy doing it. And he used the example of yelling and screaming, your pads are sweating and all that stuff. So I never really thought about that part of it much. I mean, but let's face it, the coaching at the youth level is so crucial. In terms, I like the example he used where if you go winless, but all your kids come back, that's a better season than winning every game and half your kids come back. Because in all honesty, you're trying to build a program.
Right. Well, when you're a D6 and you have 80 kids out, I assume 11 of them are pretty good. You know what I mean? It's one of those kind of things where it really is. Now let's talk about what those numbers offer you too. I think it offers you, Matt, a variety of kids. Because I think what happens, one thing I think football is unique, and this is another thing I think works in its favor in terms of state of the game. I will say this, it offers every type of athlete an opportunity to do something. Now, help me here. I don't know if that's true in other sports. I guess on the ladies' side, volleyball probably offers some specialization. But, I mean, I start thinking soccer. I start thinking basketball, even baseball a little bit with the DH or certain types of places I might be able to put a corner infielder compared to a middle infielder or a corner outfielder. But let's face it, football really offers a specialization, unlike a lot of other sports, that offers you can be the little fast guy in the slot, you can be the big guy on the line, you can be, the hard-nosed runner in between the tackles, you can be that speed guy on the sweep, whatever it might be. Don't you think that the style and the overall quality of the game kind of has been a result of a lot of different types of athletes being able to go? We see a lot of different types of offenses, and that kind of makes the game unique.
Well, I think definitely, Shayne, one of the advantages football has is that it's so inclusive, right? We mentioned it a little bit earlier, but just to expand on it, what Coach was saying there with the wide receiver that wasn't the toughest guy in the world, right? But he can make plays, he can make catches. It's a sport where there's a place for everybody. I mean, if you're sort of short and fat and not the most athletic kid, well, guess what? You can work in the weight room and become a great offensive or defensive lineman, right? If you're tall, lanky, not real physical, maybe you could be a receiver or a DB. There's a place for everybody. Even if you're just a kicker or a punter, you might not even be able to play the game of football, quote unquote,
but really impact the game.
I mean, how impactful is kickers? Punters are very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, they're not out there knocking anybody out, but they're crucial to the success of the team. So think about it, Shayne. I mean, how many sports can you say there's literally a place for everybody? I mean, so many sports, there's sort of one body type that works best, or there's one skill that works best. Football is one of those sports that can just include a ton of different people, and I think again that lends itself.
Yeah, Matt, I think it has a lot to do with the style that he ends up talking about in the interview as well, and the quality in terms of, don't you think that it's introduced the game to the different type of athletes? So again, we grew up with such a stereotype of, this is what a running back looks like. This is what a lineman looks like. This is the quarterback. This is the wide receiver. Well, goodness, think about how the quarterback positions changed in the last 10, 15, 20 years. There's different types of wide receivers now. There's different types. Some have 4, 5, 6 different pass catchers, in their offense, where others still do the old school, full house backfield, run it at you. I think a lot of those different kids that have been introduced to the game as the numbers have been increasing from some of these things, don't you think that impacts some of the style that Coach is talking about in one of your clips of the interview?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and play this clip, Shayne, where he talks about Coach Buescher talks about, I'd asked him the question basically, the style of play today, compare. I mean, he's been doing this now, keep in mind, at West Jeff for close to 2 decades. So in 2 decades, and it's the same thing with like me at Benton County, I can tell you this, the style of basketball in 2002 is different than the style of basketball today. So, and I just kind of asked him, do you think it's a better style now? There's an improvement to it. And here's what he had to say. I think we both agree in all sports, athletes are better than they were when you and I started coaching 20 years ago. No doubt about it.
Correct.
The style of play, quality of play, talk a little bit about how you feel, like what you said earlier about how you feel like the quality of play probably a little better than it was, or at least that you like it better.
Yeah, I do. I do think the quality of play is better. I think, the athletes are obviously much better than what they were even a decade ago. The advancement in nutrition and strength training and all those things. Kids are just bigger, stronger, faster, earlier, right? So I think that's just lended to a little bit in our world of football, maybe to where the quality of play is a little bit better. I think coaching's better. And I don't mean coaches were the opportunities to be better coaches there. Maybe that's what I should say that, Matt, is like, the world is at your fingertips in terms of coaching development. It was harder to be clinicked, if you will, and to learn things in the past. Now, you can just simply, get on your phone and you can be part of a Zoom session like we're doing right now, where you get my point. The access to knowledge is greater. So I think that's helped the game. And the style of play, it's changing. It seems to go in cycles. But, I think if you look back in the past, everybody was in a box in the world of football, and it's about who's the biggest, strongest, toughest. And there's still a lot of that in the game of football. It still comes down to blocking and tackling. No matter what you do, you can't win in our world if you don't do those two things, right? And so you got to block and you got to tackle. But from a style standpoint, it's more of a game of space. So I think, therefore, your true athlete type kid that might not be the most physical kid in the world can come be successful in our world if he's handled in the right way. So I do think the style now is definitely different. Personally, I think it's lent itself to be a better game, especially for a casual fan. And our development of our game, Matt, for basketball and baseball coach, I think you guys got a tough thing to deal with. I mean, football wise, we don't have AAU football, so they hear one voice. There's one staff constantly developing them fundamentally, culturally, academically. They're hearing that one voice. In your world with AAU basketball and summer baseball, and I'm not saying all that's bad. That's not my point here. But they're getting a lot of different things thrown at them from a lot of different influences, and people are emphasizing different things. Like, if you look at your program, like in basketball over the years, it's no doubt been extremely successful. So, and that's just not based on a talent-driven thing. I mean, if you look one year and a coach doesn't have success, well, that might be a little bit more talent-driven. If you look over the course of time, though, they seem to win a lot more than they lose, and they seem to max out teams that aren't real talented and still have successful years. Well, then that coach is doing it the right way. So what you might need to be emphasizing in your basketball program might not be exactly what that coach is getting emphasized in an AAU. Now if you get the luck of the draw and have a great AAU coach that emphasizes those things, that's awesome.
Right.
But it could make your job a little tougher as a basketball and baseball coach, if you will, or soccer, or you get my point, because
Right.
the mixed signals that a kid can get in those sports. In our world, there's no such thing as a mixed signal with football. There's one voice. So I think that's helped develop our game. And that's probably an unpopular opinion too, because I think a lot of our coaches would like to have some sort of like flag football leagues in the spring, or, spring football. Even though spring football would still be our voice. I, for one, am not an advocate of that. I think kids should play multiple sports. I don't think we need spring football in the state of Ohio. If I say that in a room full of football coaches, Matt, I mean, some would agree, but a lot wouldn't, right? I'm the minority there. I want our kids doing other stuff. And so it's just, but I think that's helped develop our game too, because our kids don't get burnt out. That's what I keep telling our football coaches when they bring spring football up. When they get a football season, we show up the football season, they want coach. They're hungry for football.
Right.
They get one time a year to play it.
Great point.
So like where, basketball and baseball, let's be honest, you can play it year round.
Oh, yeah. I had a dad tell me one time, my son played 82 basketball games. I was like, that's not a good thing.
No, it's not a good thing. And so like in our world, you play one game a week. You can play one time a year. So when it hits to that time of year, kids crave it. Yeah. They want it so bad that they'll do anything they can to be successful for the most part.
So Shayne, I found it interesting just listening to him there talking about how he thinks it's a little bit more of it's a more watchable game now for the average fan. It's a little more entertaining. I think, most people agree, like he and I talked about, you and I have talked about this in other sports, where the athlete, there's no question the athlete's improved a great deal over the last 10, 15 years, however far you want to go back. But, he talked about how the style of the game is like more enjoyable now, probably a little more offensive style, a little more in space. I think he talked about a lot there. So it's that type of thing. And it leads me, and you and I, Shayne, and we've got a clip here in a few minutes coming up of him talking about, I asked him about rules and potential rule changes. You and I have talked a lot about rules. We did a whole show on rules, right? And we talk about, and I know we're going to talk about when we do our basketball state of the game this too, but we've talked about how rules affect certain sports. I mean, we've used volleyball as an example of how great that game has become due to some rule changes. And before we listen to Coach Buescher here, what do you think about like some of the rules in football? I know there's been a lot of safety things for change. A lot of rules change for safety reasons. But there's also been rules put in place to, maybe favor the offense or make it more entertaining. Just in general, though, Shayne, like, how much do you think rules and rule changes and our governing bodies that control those rules, how important is that to a state of a game?
Well, I think you could argue it's the foundation of the entire sport. I think that obviously safety is going to be at the forefront, and rightfully so in many cases. But at the same time, when you talk about watchability, when you talk about enjoyment of play, such as volleyball, these rules, in 2 or 3 of my conversations with some of the great play callers and the great coaches here in Southeast Ohio over the last week, we've talked about how the rules, quite frankly, makes defense really hard to play. It's one of those things that it encourages you as a play caller to take some of your best athletes and look for space, look for those one-on-one opportunities. When you start to you put 5 athletes out in space at the smaller level, especially, not every school has the ability to match up with that many different athletes on the other side of the ball defensively. So a lot of times the rules will favor the offense, makes it very, very difficult to scheme defensively, some of those different things. It also goes back to the factor of what types of kids can get involved. One coach talked to me about the concerns of special teams in the future. They talked about how special teams really gives you a unique opportunity for athletes to be involved. You mentioned the kicker, you mentioned the punter, but how about return people? How about long snapper? That's one thing. They said you'd be amazed how many people get their college education. They said, go out sometime, you think you're a former athlete, go out and try to long snap a little bit one time and see how that goes for you. That's intriguing to me because, again, it goes back to what we were talking about, all the different types of skills that take place in football. And I think rules, if they're not careful, I think they can almost go to the extreme of eliminating a third of the game. You know what I mean? Special teams have played such a vital role. I don't mean to sound like Jim Tressel here, but special teams plays such a vital role in terms of the outcome of games, the field position. You're talking about single plays that flip the field 40, 50, 60 yards. And are we going to eliminate that? You know what I mean? Are we going to, those guys that have the skill of snapping and holding and kicking and
return guys.
Return guys. So all of these different guys, I think that's something interesting too, where we connect the style that coach is talking about into the rules and how it kind of starts to connect together. I think those are some fascinating points. I've really enjoyed talking to some of our coaches.
Yeah, it is. I mean, one of the coaches I talked to from our area, he made a great comment. He said, I still think one of the toughest plays for a defense to make is and maybe the toughest, he said, was a one-on-one tackle in space. If it's just you and one other guy out there, you got to make that play. Well, you'll hear when we talk. Well, you heard when we played the clip of state of play or style of play that Coach Buescher talked about spacing, right? Space and everything spread out. Well, so if the predominant style becomes a spread style, it makes it hard on the defense to make those tackles. And then it also, if the rules also favor the offense to where you can't make contact with receivers downfield, things like that, it really almost makes defensive back the worst position in the game to play, probably.
There's no doubt.
But no, I mean, I asked Coach Buescher with this clip here, Shayne. I asked him just, rules in general. We had already talked about some of the safety things. So he basically just had one more idea I wanted to share with everybody right here.
Sure. The safety rules I thought were good. I think our game needed that. One, for participation numbers, just for the well-being of kids, and just to continue to promote our game. But the one rule change I would love to see from the NFHS for Ohio high school football is for our hashes to become the college hashes. It just make it more of a game of space. And that's probably might be relative, to be totally transparent, Matt, because of what we do. We're a spread offense, right? So that would make it better for us to be able to utilize the whole field. I'll be honest, maybe I'm being selfish there. But I also think it would allow good athletes to showcase their skills better. Right now, where our hashes are, we do some boundary stuff, but I really got to force myself to do it because there's not a lot of space over there, right? So if you would move the hashes back in to be able to have more space outside the hashes, I think that would benefit high school game a lot better. And to be honest, this is be like a minor detail of it, but if you can make it more of a game of space on both sides, I also truly honestly think it also helps with the safety aspect of it.
I was going to ask you that because I was like, man, this might be a dumb question, but the more spread out it is it less physical or is it less, or at least?
Well, I don't know if you're ever going to get away from the physicality in the game of football just because, in the end, you still got to block, you still got to tackle, right? I mean, so it's going to be a physical game no matter what you do. But if you can make it more of a game of space, it is more sometimes maybe one-on-one instead of gang-type tackles. Right. And I'm not saying that's a reason to do it right there. I don't think that'll minimize it. That's more of a thought. Yeah. But, the main reason I would like it is for selfish reasons because I think with what we do offensively, it would help us a lot.
Well, Matt, that was some good stuff. I thought it was funny. We're always in coaching looking for a little edge there. I couldn't help but get a kick out of, obviously the style of play and the different space and athletes. And I think we're all guilty of that in terms of, we don't mind the pitch count in baseball in the year where we have 6 or 7 different arms, right? It's one of those things. But no, in all seriousness, the rules and the style of play that really connected together nice. And I want to dive into one last factor here that I thought was fascinating in listening to Coach as he starts to talk about earlier the youth programs and then down into your junior high with the numbers they have, and then I started thinking of state of the game of football, and I can't imagine how important a complete staff would be. I know in baseball how near impossible it really is to do the proper varsity job without 2, 3, 4 quality in terms of different areas to where someone's really watching and offering that help, those sets of eyes on every swing in your program. And then you have that other guy with your pitching, and then that guy with your catching and the different things. Basketball, I think we agree, it's the same way. You know what I mean? Could you imagine trying to do it with just one person or even really 2 or 3? It sometimes takes 2, 3 good people. And that's just at the varsity level. That's not even counting all the way down into your junior high and your little league program. So to me, a state of the game problem for so many programs is the inability to complete a staff. And there's a lot of different things that come into my mind. This is where I want to play on you as coach, play on you as AD, administrator, everything. Some situations it might be a financial thing. Maybe you just can't quite offer the money or whatever the resources may be to get people. The other thing is, let's face it, if you're not real successful, sometimes people, a lot of times you get those programs that are really successful, and all of a sudden someone will be the assistant wide receiver coach for a t-shirt and hat, right? But I hear Coach talk so much about people skills and about how that goes into coaching as well, because don't you think it's one, how you treat people, 2, it's how sometimes we even prepare people, because a lot of times you get these younger guys come back, maybe they're former players or whatever, and then they work their way up and they go. What are your thoughts on knowing how important it is in basketball, knowing how important it is in baseball or volleyball or whatever it is? Don't you think that's times 10 in football in terms of, I don't know how you'd even come close to running a football program without a long list of some quality people.
Yeah, you'll hear me say when we play this clip here, Shayne, and you'll hear me talk about that a little bit, about how, like in basketball, obviously, I've said all along, the best coaches are the ones with the best staffs in basketball. But theoretically, on a given night, let's say, a head coach could coach his entire team. You'll hear me say this on this clip. And, in football, that's just never going to happen with 80 kids, like in his case. But even if you're a guy with 45, 50, whatever. So you're right that the staff in football is so important. And the interesting thing about this clip you're going to hear here, Shayne, is this almost didn't happen because Coach Buescher and I were talking, and we were about ready just to sort of end the discussion or whatever. And he brought this up, and I'm so glad he did, because it really is part of the state of the game. Because if you think about it, he's talked about earlier, if you remember, he talked about how kids will lose the love of the game. The numbers will drop if you're not careful, if you don't do it the right way. And that obviously hurts the product, right? So really this staff development piece, even though you would think, well, what's that have to do with state of the game? Well, it does, because if every coach in Ohio did a better job of developing his staff and coaching got better across the board, then I think it increases numbers. Kids want to play. The product on the field's better, right? All those things. So
every category we've talked about. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just listen to this clip where Coach Buescher talks about staff development.
I tell you another thing, Matt, that I really think, and this isn't a football relative thing, but I think this is overlooked a lot too. Is for coaches in general, and I think you've done a good job of this, but I think a major thing for a young coach or some coaches that they overlook is staff development.
Yeah.
When I talk to some younger guys up here that might come and talk to us about our program success, all the things I've already alluded to, I think add up to. There's a lot of reasons why you're successful, a lot of reasons why you're not, right? But I think one of the overlooked things is, from a head coaching perspective, is not doing a good enough job of setting the tone with your own staff of your expectations of how you want them to coach and treat kids, and two, then developing them. One of my pet peeves is hearing a head coach say that, I have dumb kids, or my staff's not very good. Well, my thing is, you as the head coach, it's your job to educate your kids so they're not dumb athletes, and it's your job to develop those staff. So if you got two things, that's a reflection of your poor leadership. That is a pet peeve of mine that I always talk about the guys when they come talk to us, Matt. That staff development is such a crucial part to success, and we're pretty fortunate here. We're very fortunate here. Our staff, I am blessed. Yeah. I am so blessed here. Our assistants do such a great job all the way down to middle school, but because we're getting older, man. Yeah. A lot of our assistants now are former players.
Yeah. Well, but I always like that too. I've got one former player on my staff who's been with me 7 or 8 years. Who knows better what you expect than a former player? And who knows better what these guys are going through than a guy that's went through it with you?
Matt, you hit on the head in my opinion there. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, our program expectations culturally have not changed at all. So they come in and they're able to drive that home from the perspective of a coach and as a former player. I think that's a perfect point you make. And also, I think those guys, they understand my expectations, but they understand the culture of our program, right? I'm not teaching them. They understand a little bit about our scheme, and we tweak things over the years, but the culture standpoint has not changed. So they can come in and hit the ground running in terms of what we really believe in and promote, what we live, what we tell our kids every day, what we live, love, and promote daily. Those former players know it because they lived it. So it's really helped. And you know what else it does? I hope I'm better. I like to think I'm extremely approachable with our kids, but as well as I do, man, being in the role you are as a head coach, you're kind of the last stop before the bus stop, right? Yeah. So it gives that buffer where they can go talk to an assistant that's, not their age, but a little younger. Sure. Who they can go talk to, and they can just have that good conversation with and not feel judged. Yeah. That's helped us too. I mean, and our assistants do a great job of taking care of a lot of problems before they ever get to me, which is awesome, right? And I'm not distracted. It's not headaches. It was dealt with at a lower level, and we rock and move on. But that staff development piece, Matt, I think is crucial for anybody to be successful. And I think it sure is in your sport too. But if you think about in the sport of football,
it's even more so in football.
Yeah, there's so many moving parts, right? And there's so many different kids are involved. Like, I said, we got 80 kids involved, and then we have at the high school level, we have 9 assistants, so there's a lot of parts you got to deal with. And so having those guys truly engaged and bought in, I think, is very crucial, just because the complexity of it.
Right. And just their ability to teach, because if you think about it, like I can theoretically coach my entire team at one time. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. You can't coach 80 kids at one time.
No.
You know what I mean? So you're trusting your people with, to teach them the right thing, because you can't teach it yourself. Not to everybody.
No, you're exactly right. And so we spend a lot of time in our off season on staff development within the framework of not only getting yourself better as a coach by going out to talk to people, but also our own staff development in terms of expectations. And this is how we go about the business. This is how we teach, to your point, because despite what people think, coaching is teaching. I mean, if you're a good teacher, I can give you the knowledge, but if you can teach, we can make you a good coach, even if you've never played the game. I mean, if you can teach, you can coach. And so we spent a lot of time in the off season on that from the staff perspective. And I don't want to say more than most. I don't know how all other programs do it, but I know some of the people that we talk to, the amount of times we meet is probably more than what some programs do anyway.
That's some really good stuff there. I mean, that's some incredible leadership. But again, I love the connection to state of the game, and I think that goes with every sport. But I just again, as I said leading into that, I just think in football, Matt, it's even more. So I guess as I put it all together in final thoughts, if I take from the general comments to the youth discussion, style of play, rules, that staff leadership and development, I guess I would ask you this. How do you balance this? I think this is the $1 million question here when it comes to football, but this can really apply to leadership in general. How do you balance being the best, being the top dog? So many times I hear people say, we're really good at that. We're the best at that. Well, there's still nothing wrong with evaluating and getting better and continuing to push forward. It doesn't mean you should just stop where you're at. However, I do think there's a level of greed and there's a level of overkill to where you do too much of it. You follow what I'm saying there? I guess what I want to hear from you in terms of final thoughts, where I guess there's no perfect answer, but where in your mind is that happy medium? Where is that balance between we're the best, we're going to continue to shine our product and put it out there on top, compared to overdoing it to the point where I think you said it earlier, people don't crave it as much, or maybe all of a sudden it starts to lose its shine?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Shane. And there is a balance there, I think. I think we've talked a lot in these 21 podcasts now when it comes to leadership, the importance of balance, the importance of, there's an art to this coaching, there's an art to leadership. It's just like when it comes to you're really good, let's say your program's at a certain place, like Coach Buescher's is, or like some of the other people we know, their programs. How do you still get better yet? To me, it's just like, again, it goes back to that, what we've talked about before, of you constantly question everything you do. You constantly question, why do we do what we do? And if that answer is, well, we've just sort of always done it that way, well, that's not good enough. Okay, let's take a look and make sure there's not a better way to do it. It's those little improvements, because it's kind of like that guy in the 100-meter dash. He's not going to knock a second and a half off his time, right? He's knocking 0.2 of a second off his time. So if your program's in a great place, there are still little improvements you can make. And I just think there's just no reason to become so completely satisfied that you stop trying to find little ways to improve. Why does McDonald's advertise? Now think about it. I thought about that one time. Like, why do they advertise? I mean, don't you get to a certain point where you're McDonald's? Like if that commercial comes on, doesn't say, well, there's this thing called a Big Mac that looks pretty good, I can run over again. No, I already know that. I mean, if McDonald's stopped putting commercials on tomorrow, is it business going to go down? I don't know. But my point is, McDonald's wants to get better. It's never enough. It's like, we're at the top of the mountain, but there's got to be another rung. There's got to be another height to get to. Because don't you think that's what greatness is?
Well, I think the connection is on the numbers. Complacent. I think the question here again, at a D6 school, if you're getting 20 kids per grade, that's a huge reason for success. As soon as you stop treating people the right way, as soon as you stop implementing your program, you and I know, Matt, it only takes 2 or 3 years where all of a sudden 20 becomes 10, starts to fall down a little bit, and it can go. So I think, again, it's that, what are we doing well? Let's continue to do it. We don't do that very well. Let's do that a little bit better. And it just keeps going and cycling. But as soon as that cycle stops, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah, because I think people who are great, and I mentioned this last week. I used the Alan Stein example where he talked about how great players or great leaders, they're always asked the question, what's next? And,
Right.
they control what they can control. They believe in the process, but they always say they have the next play mentality. We tell our players to have, right? What's next? It's always what's next. Let's be honest, if you ever stop asking what's next, then you've probably lost the drive, haven't you, at that point? And it's just time to go. I mean, because I think as a leader, I'm not saying that you shouldn't step back sometimes and enjoy the success. Yeah, I hope Coach Buescher at some point has stepped back and say, wow, we've done a good job here and we've enjoyed it. I'm sure he has at times. But then you have
we've made the regional championship like half the years in the last 2 decades.
Right. But I mean, I guarantee you, knowing him the way I do,
Right.
I guarantee you that's short-lived, and then he's thinking, okay, what are we going to next? And I think that's what great leaders do. So I just think, I really enjoyed this show. I hope, I know we delved into some leadership topics but I think they all, at the end of the day, sort of come back into the state of the game, to the state of today's high school football.
And I do, and I'll tell you, I've had a lot of follow-up about baseball and with a lot of great baseball people, and I'd love to hear from a lot of our football listeners, be it the youth philosophy, be it the style or the quality of the game or the different X and O schemes, how rules have impacted. And then, again, I think staff leadership's right at the heart of the state of the game of football, but I think it really applies in all sports. So I'd love to hear feedback. If you want to give us that feedback, you can do so on social media. If you'd like, on Twitter, Facebook, look us up, SVC Sports Zone, or you can give an email if you'd rather do it a little bit more privately. It's admin1@svcsportzone.com. So, Matt, on that note, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. What a great show 21. Really looking forward to the feedback, and appreciate Coach joining us this week. That was so good in terms of just not football. I just enjoyed it from leadership. I almost felt like it was a professional development for me in so many ways in terms of how dynamic he was in his thoughts. So again, thank you. So on that note, guys, we're going to get on out of here. We'll see you again next week. We appreciate all the support here on Expanding the Zone.